am getting a little emotional right now because we actually did follow our dreams. And so I want to say to you, please, please, please take the risks that are in your heart because it is so worth it in the end. What's up, guys? Today we wanted to talk to you about how we built our dreams.
So today we are so lucky. We've been to over 70 countries. We're our own bosses. We get to travel basically whenever we want, but it wasn't always that way.
This is a result of lots of hours behind a computer, trial and error, sleepless nights, and most importantly, the faith in ourselves.
High five.
Woo. Let's rewind for a second. The date is April 2015.
We didn't know it at the time, but we were destined to change our lives. Colette came home from, a normal day of work, and she had listened to a podcast that was on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and it was Rolf Potts. And she was fired up to go travel for a long time. We always talked about it and joked about it during our honeymoon and our annual trips, but we were never really serious. And this time I realized Colette was absolutely serious about traveling around the world. But I was a little hesitant. So we finished our dinner, and about a day or two later, I listened to the same podcast on my way to work, full of caffeine, and my mind was changed. The next few hours, I sent her email after email with a list of things we need to do before we travel because I was 100% in, ready to do this.
I remember looking down at my phone and having, I think, 5 emails from Scott, and it was just list after list of what we need to do. To quit our jobs and travel the world. And at that moment, I was like, holy cow, this is actually going to happen. We are going to pursue our dreams.
But once the two of us actually started thinking we're going to do this, then the fear started setting in. We realized this is so much bigger than what we should be doing. I mean, this is going against all the cultural norms that we've grown up with, where you follow your career path, you stay in line, and we were bucking the system. And the two of us were so anxious, so apprehensive about doing this. So that's when the fear set in, and that's when we had to figure out, how are we really going to do this?
So the first step we took to following our dreams was something called fear setting. Now this is when you have a lot of fears inside your head. We all have them, but it's time to put them down on paper.
So you may ask, what is fear setting? So it's a 3-part process where you define, prevent, and repair. First, you define your fear. What exactly is the fear that you have? Then you figure out, how could I potentially prevent this fear from becoming a reality? And then if it does become a reality, how can I repair any damage that has occurred? So let's take, for example, our jobs. We were so fearful, what's gonna happen if we can't get a job when we get back? So we wrote that out. We said, okay, worst case is we can't get jobs. What can we do? How can we prevent this? Well, we can keep our resumes up to date. We can stay in contact with old friends and colleagues and bosses. And we said, okay, let's say that we still can't get a job. What else can we do? Maybe we can take a job for lesser pay for short term. So we'll put a link to a template of fear setting, and we'll also link to some of ours to show you all the stuff that we were worried about.
So some of our fears were about our house. We had just purchased a house less than a year ago. Would we be able to cover our mortgage? Could we rent it out? Then medical. Would we have medical insurance now that we're quitting our jobs? What if we got hurt or sick on the road? And the big one, money. Can we afford this? What's it gonna cost?
So we went through and we made a budget. We looked at what's the average cost of traveling through multiple countries. Other people have done this. We put a high, medium, and low, and me being the engineer, put it all in a spreadsheet. And we projected out the entire cost of the trip for the 7 to 8 months. And we said, okay, I think we can live with this cost. And so we tried to stick to that budget as close as we could as we traveled around the world.
And then in your budget, you had something at the bottom so that we would fill in what we would spend every single day. And at the bottom, it would list how much money we had left in our savings. Smart cookie.
So then at the end, we knew the total impact that it was going to cost us to make this trip around the world. So we'll also put a link to these sheets so you can have these as reference in case you want to take the same journey. And now that we had addressed all of our fears, it was time to consider the risks that we were taking. And so we reviewed everything and we approached all the risks and took smart risks. You know, we didn't just decide that we were going to travel on credit cards and throw all caution to the wind. We decided that we were going to be very methodical about how we did take this trip and be smart with all these decisions that we made. And so, for example, the financial decisions. You know, fortunately, we had a financial parachute. We had savings that we could lean on because we had been saving for a second home.
The other decision that we made was trading money for time. Now, this is the idea of time currency, that you want to spend your time wisely. And all too often, especially in the United States, we wait until we're 70 years old to quit our jobs or retire and travel the world. Well, guess what? When you're 70 years old, unfortunately, you might not have your health. You might not have your wealth. There are no guarantees in this life. So we went into this realizing that, and we wanted to take the time together while we're young, healthy, and vibrant to travel the world, enjoy it together and all of its wonders, because we might not ever get this chance again.
We didn't want to be the people who saw the world through the window of a tour bus. We wanted to be the ones who were out there smelling it, feeling it, tasting it, climbing the rocks. And we knew that now was the time that we could do it, not when you're older and things that aren't so guaranteed.
Buongiorno! It is our first full day in Sardinia.
Stromboli. Some of our tips while you're in Venice.
From the Dolomites.
And that leads us into our next decision. We were willing to fail. Now that may sound silly, but we had addressed all of our concerns and risks. We realized that the worst case scenario wasn't necessarily that bad. The risk of actually living the mundane, boring, predictable life was a greater risk than taking this journey, this trip, this leap of faith around the world. As Rolf Potts says, the stoplights in life are never all green. So that means that there's never a perfect time to take a risk. You know, to ask that girl out on a date, to ask for a promotion, to tell the person that you love them. Sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith and hope that it works out. And that's exactly what we did, and we were okay with the consequences if they ended up to be the worst case. Fortunately, they didn't, and we're very grateful for it.
And at that point, we kind of redefined what failure was in itself. To take a risk is a great success. Not following the status quo might be looked at differently from other people, but for us, that was a success in itself. Which leads us into our last note. Before we left for our around the world trip, we visualized our future. When we were 70 years old in our rocking chairs, talking about the lives that we led and the stories that we could tell, we wanted to look back and be proud of those. And we wanted to have spent those times, those beautiful times together. So when you think about your life, 40 years from now or 50 years from now, what do you want it to look like? Will you be proud of the risks you took? Or do you think you'll be okay saying, I'm glad I settled with that just subpar relationship or subpar life? Think about that story you want to tell to your loved ones, to your grandkids, and most importantly, to yourself.
We looked at it and we said, do we want to be the people who talked about traveling the world, who talked about taking a risk? Or do we want to be the ones who took the risk, who started writing their own story? And we decided at that point, once we had thought about that and visualized our future, we were set. Our minds were on fire, we were ready to go. And at that point, all we had to do was find enough Pepto. Because when you travel enough, your belly's gonna hit some bumps on the road. And this leads us into part 2 of our series, which is gonna be how we actually plan the trip. So,
thank you for tuning in. I'm getting a little emotional right now because we actually did follow our dreams. And so I want to say to you, please, please, please take the risks that are in your heart because it is so worth it in the end.
as always, I'm Scott.
And I'm Colette.
And if you liked what you saw and this story touches you just a little bit, please like and subscribe below.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey.
Bye.
Crying on camera.